Hey guys, welcome back here, D-Rave, and we're going to talk about another one of my crazy ideas, nicknamed GARP, the Great Africa River Project. This was something I did in 2015. I gave it as my final speech in public speaking in college, and I've still got all my original notes here, as well as my talking cards to help me prep and be ready. With that, so we're going to talk about this. This idea could never really come true unless I was able to financially provide, like with my biofuel cell, the money really to fund such a project off the get go. But so the idea was, and I showed here, I did a little bit of polling within my class to see if they were informed on the problems in sub Saharan countries and basically what they cared about. Of course, I predicted the most common argument was going to be we should be helping people here instead of helping people in other countries. And so through this project and speech, I showed that, the people in these countries did not even meet the bottom two levels of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And Maslow's hierarchy of needs basically states that we can't ascend up the levels until we've met the prerequisites of the previous levels. And I showed how people here in the United States could still have access to food kitchens, homeless shelters, food stamps, Medicaid, and other social safe nets, while, in some other countries, it's really bad. And of course, we showed that they didn't really understand the depth of the problem, which is what drove me nuts, just thinking about it all the time. Um, so the idea was to propose a solution to a chronic problem that we treat as, we band-aid the problem more. So we send billions of dollars every year from the Western Hemisphere to sub-Saharan countries, but a lot of the money is misused, used to provide immediate temporary relief, or just kind of hidden away, bribery, all that kind of stuff. So the idea of the Great Africa River Project is to try to meet those basic two levels of needs while providing a long-term solution. So with this being said, I kind of plotted an original course of the river, and I'm going to show you here in a few other slides why I went this direction. And of course, later on, when I was in sociology class later in my college career, Nigeria in this, I believe the northwest section, like almost every child under 5 had died from starvation and water scarcity problems. So the river comes out to approximately 3,400 miles, and that does seem like a lot. However, if you live in the United States, you might have heard something of the Intercoastal Waterway. This is a waterway that spans almost from Virginia, I believe, from Virginia all the way to Texas. It's a system that was partially man-made. We connected a lot of already existing water systems, wove it in and out of the ocean, and if you check the length, it's actually not too much longer. Now, of course, a lot of that was more there already, but my river actually is going to kind of play on a few already water features that exist there. It's kind of hard to see, but in Niger, we're heading to Lake Niger. Um, and the thing is, when we built the river and the Panama Canal and all these big water projects a long time ago, the existing machinery and advances in technology weren't really there. So I feel like the project today would not really be as big as some of these other projects in the past. And again, so we're going to start kind of in Nigeria, head up to Niger, through Chad, through South Sudan, to Kenya, and then up through Ethiopia to the Gulf of Aden. Now, I will admit, and Kenya, going to Ethiopia will be a little hard. I know geographically speaking, that area has some serious elevation changes, if I'm not mistaken. But part of the river's idea is actually to undercut the Sahara, and we're going to talk about that in a little bit, how the Sahara is further eroding a lot of the soil, and like it's just, So again, we're stressing, how does the river help? So food, water, shelter. We're going to address kind of like that first level. So we're trying to provide a water source that is so large that it cannot become privatized, or so a long-term solution to the water scarcity issue. And with that, kind of with the food, next step becomes food. The joke is you give a man a fish for a day. Um, we'll go into it here in a minute. So let's talk about it here. So what's the problem? And with Nat Geo article, approximately 240 to 300 million people suffer from water scarcity and malnourishment every year. 75% of the people in Africa rely on groundwater as their primary source of water. So we're trying to create a much larger source of groundwater. With that, 90% of the soil is unsuitable for agriculture, and they're losing hectares, what a hectare, every year. Like, it's disturbing. And another problem I'm looking to fix is a refugee problem. So my camera's kind of covering it there, but we from that area, there is 5.4 million IDPs from those three countries there, as well as 1.5 million refugees. Now, IDPs stands for internally displaced person. IDPs that leave their country become refugees, essentially. So we're trying to address the food, water, and shelter problem. Now, with the food, though, let me see here. Yeah, we'll get to it. One more second. So I've got some maps here, and I apologize, it cut off the titles of this. So from left to right, the first blue map is going to be a United Nations Hunger Index in 2013. The second red map is going to be a soil degradation map from the UN, and the third map, a chronic malnutrition percentage of children under 5 with growth delay from 2012. And as you can see, my river project kind of lines up with a lot of the really bad countries there. And we're aiming to kind of focus as well right under the Sahara. So from the UN data, you can see when I planned this, which was the most recent data I could pull at that time because they do in multi-year, I believe. Um, the river is really hitting a lot of the key target areas. So again, how does it help? So we're trying to provide a large amount of fresh water that cannot be monopolized. There are militia groups and bad guys in there, and we're going to talk about this later. They're not going to just let me do what I want to do. The joke is you give a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, you feed him for a lifetime. It's kind of cruel to tell someone to pull themselves up by their bootstraps when the boots ain't got no straps and they ain't got no boots. So the idea is not only to possibly give, create an ecosystem so that fish will thrive, but also we're trying to fix the land itself. As we showed or talked about a minute ago, a lot of that soil is not suitable for agriculture and, of course, not suitable for livestock either. So we have to find a way to long term create a solution here. And I feel like that much water coming back into the area might be able to revive the soil essentially. And with the shelter, I'm going to show here, Elon Musk showed it with his brick company. We can take dirt and make crazy things. And there are still tons of people across the world that are still living in dirt built homes. So the idea is to take all these people that are internally displaced refugees and create refugee sites where we can partner with the already aid that's being sent that way, Red Cross and the billions and billions of dollars that are being sent in aid from countries, and try to create focus groups essentially. Because as I showed on the pyramid, I want to go back to it. One of the more important things I want to highlight here is in the safety, the second level, security of body, security of employment, security of resources, and I think security of morality. I think that's very important. I'm telling you, these men and women, they're fighters. They will do whatever it takes to rebuild their lives. I promise you that, and they have a sense of pride in that. So the idea is that we build shelters along the way, refugee sites, and we try to set up communities essentially, like I said, ecosystems as well. So the entire river does not have to be built in one shot. Like case in point, we might just start in Nigeria and build that section and build offshoot systems and ponds and lakes and create places that can be sustainable. Um, I used this guy. I'm sorry I forgot his name, but I used to love his channel. He built incredible structures out of basically nothing but dirt and making kilns out of dirt. Love his channel. I wish I could remember his name. Of course, I knew it in 2015 when I gave the presentation. So with that, I headed to the second level. So what's the problem here? there's violent militia groups in the area. In 2011, there's the refugee numbers and IDP numbers again. And like I actually talked about at the time, Boko Haram at that time had pledged its allegiance to ISIS, and we know a lot of their money comes through these black markets in these areas. 90% of all the malaria cases in Africa, of course, those 2013, these are old stats. Please, old stats here. Keep that in mind. Um, so how it helps security of body, health, resources, and morality. So security of body, of course, we're going to be building almost small towns and communities that, of course, as I said, the bad guys aren't going to let me do what I want to do, but we'll get to that here in just a little bit more so. But we're going to need not only possibly a private military groups, but as well as international support as well. Security of health, of course, like I talked about, partnering with a lot of these health organizations and creating bigger hubs to effectively treat and educate people on diseases. Security of resources, employment, and morality. I talked about at the time the Gates Foundation, how they'd done a lot of anti-corruption work in other countries, and just bringing in people together to create these communities that are truly prideful on making change and basically reclaiming their African heritage and land. Um, and here we talk about here protection for, we're going to need protection for workers, protection for people in camp. We're going to need longer range international help, which again discussed later. Talked about some of the health organizations there, and again, I linked a TED talk I love. So Gary Hugan did a TED talk about reasons for poverty in the world, and he actually talks about how security is one of the leading reasons for poverty in the world, and how really horrific it can be to not have someone when you pick up the phone and call a number that's going to come help you or possibly help you. So very important there. And I think that's where I linked a little bit of the TED talk, like a short little bit of him talking about it. So rationalizing how we can do this. So of course, like I said, I'm trying to figure out how I can partner with larger organizations. Of course, none of this comes true unless honestly I'm running on my biofuel cell company, the SHME, and I have enough money to put towards it myself. The international help, how am I going to get the U.S. to come help? Because we're not stupid. We know the U.S. is not coming to help me unless there's money involved. Even though Boko Haram has been a key financial supplier for terrorist groups, which should be enough to get us in there, but it's not. And China is actually already in the area with peacekeepers, but so how am I going to pay for this? So the idea was, and this is going to sound bad, and it says it right there, I stress this, more ethical Panama Canal style contracts based on natural resources. Now I know this is going to probably be really crazy idea, and this is where it sounds bad. But so as like you see there, 5 of the 10 largest oil exporters are some of the countries I go through. Africa holds like 30% of all the remaining rare minerals in the world, including 40% of the gold reserves, 60% of the cobalt, 90% of the platinum. And we know a lot of these companies, a lot of these countries are really willing to pay for these natural resources right now. That's why China's in the area already. So the idea was to set up almost a contract where a percentage is given to the country where it's found in. A percentage is given to the country that is willing to give international support and donate towards the actual project itself, as well as, actually maybe a little bit towards the project itself. But so the idea was to incentivize countries basically to donate in almost a resource bidding nature. And of course, the big problem becomes estimation of resources available in the ground. And of course, I would like the resources to be turned back over to the hosting or founding country, like the country it's found in, like Nigeria, for example, before the total expenditure of the resources, which is why estimation of the resources in general at first becomes very critical. Because I don't want this to turn into a scandal where people are being abused, or China's like, we're not leaving, we're taking all these resources, and it ends up in a standoff of what are we going to do. So there's a lot that plays into that. I know it's not a simple idea, but it's hard to try to get this complex of an idea originally down, I think, into a 15-minute video, which I'm at 14:57 right now. So the second part of this also was a lot of people consider Ethiopia the birthplace of life. And I talked about, I don't have the slides for it now, but I talked about it, how there's crowdsourcing. A lot of these areas, due to the erosion, we are seeing a lot of artifacts and previous civilizations coming to the surface. And at the time, there was a crowd project where basically it was too dangerous an area to send in archaeologists and keep their teams there. So what they were doing is flying drones over top of the area, crowdsourcing to see if they saw anything. And of course, like if you saw something, you recommend it, and then might go to an expert, and they might look into it more. And they were showing how, like I said, there were civilizations coming to the surface, and it was just being eroded and destroyed. And so the idea was also, I have a feeling, through not only finding, we're going to find a lot of natural resources in this ground, but potentially we're going to find a lot of archaeological evidence. And the idea was to set up what already is happening in the world. Hey, Great Britain, you donated this much. Would you like to bid on some of these archaeological artifacts? Now, of course, it would go to exhibit in, like, let's say Great Britain for some odd time, which then, of course, always, 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 whenever the host country is more built up, bring that everything back to Africa. So the idea was to not only hopefully through my own private companies fund a lot of this, but hire private military, as well as getting. So if the U.S. has natural resources in the area, I might be able to get a few drones. I might be able to get maybe some aerial surveillance that'll help me deal, my private military and other people deal. This could be a huge chance for international communication and teamwork, but the idea was basically, I didn't care that, yes, resources might not go where they're supposed to go, but the idea is focused solely on how can I help people. There are so many people that are in such desperate need of help. And it's hard for us as Americans to even fathom sometimes what other countries are going through. Now, not everything is like that. Not everything in those countries is horrible. There is plenty of great things in those countries, and beautiful communities and towns and cities, but there's also so many that are hurting. And I just want some way to not only help them, but stop band-aiding a problem, looking for a more permanent solution. And one of the repercussions I talked about in this, but I don't have a slide for, is like I talked about, I'm not a meteorologist. I'm not a weather scientist of any type. I do not have any schooling in that nature. This much water moving over a large area, very hot, humid area, could cause significant, possibly even weather pattern changes. We know a lot of that, comes from Africa over the Atlantic and hits us in hurricane season. Would we see changes in there? Would we see changes in the rain season? Like, there's so much, honestly. Like I said, this is such a bigger thing, but I'm trying to do it in less than 20 minutes. But with that being said, that's the basis of GARP, the Great Africa River Project, one of my crazy ideas. I hope you like it. You probably think I'm just even crazier than you used to. If you like it, though, leave me a comment, leave me a like, subscribe. I don't know. It's hard to be positive sometimes these days. And like I said, this, from the deepest part of my soul, is about helping people. And I tied this to my nonprofit idea I originally called the One Foundation. I think the name's taken now. I actually even sent this idea to a bunch of TV stations and radio stations in Colorado Springs, but of course no one messaged me back. But thanks for dropping in, guys. Hopefully I can get this uploaded later.